February 19th, 2026. Inside the Milan Arena, silence wasn't just an absence of noise. It was a weight. The tension, absolute suffocation. We're down to the wire, women's free skate finals. The camera zooms in tight, coaches holding their breath. Alysa Liu holds that final pose, and for a split second the whole world stops spinning before the numbers hit the board. Gold. But you can't trace this victory back to Italy. You can't even trace it to Oakland. The real story starts decades ago. Rural Sichuan province, mid-60s. Picture dirt roads, zero electricity, and 6 kids crammed under one roof. One of those kids was Alysa Liu. And trust me, that's not just background noise. It's the only way to understand the sheer insanity of the distance between the starting line and the podium. Arthur remembers chasing scraps of light just to read books. Father was a civil servant, mother worked the fields. In a town built on rigid tradition, he smashed every barrier, stacked up degrees and broke into Chinese academia right as the political winds started to shift. Then came 1989. If you know Beijing history, you know the vibe students in the streets a mix of hope and danger. Arthur wasn't watching from the sidelines, he was right there in the crowd. We don't have to guess what happened next. He's been open about it. The gavel came down and his fate was sealed. Staying meant suffering. So he bolted for California. Different soil, different rules, and that fancy law degree. Suddenly, just a worthless piece of paper. Barely spoke English. Had to claw his way up from absolute zero. People usually skip over this part. Starting over sounds romantic in a biography. Living through it is a whole different beast. It meant going back to school, retaking the bar, and fighting against kids 10 years younger who never had to run for their lives. Arthur crushed the American bar exam and hung his own shingle. His specialty, immigration law. It wasn't glamorous. It was survival. Guiding people through the same bureaucratic maze he barely survived himself. No Hollywood magic here. Just the grind. Filing paperwork, client meetings, sleepless nights, and crushing Bay Area rent. Then at 40, he took a left turn most people wouldn't dare. Single, but desperate to be a father. He didn't wait for a partner. He blazed his own trail with donors and surrogates bringing 5 kids into the world. Alysa was first, then Selena. Then came the triplets Julia, Justin and Joshua. Arthur's mum flew in from China to help manage the chaos. For years, all 7 of them were packed into a 1-bedroom apartment in the Bay. 1 room, 3 bunk beds. Alysa actually admitted she misses those days. Sure, it was tight, but it was loud and full of love. Just brothers and sisters giggling in the dark. This isn't the backstory you hear on the Olympic highlight reel. There was no private backyard rink, no elite training facility, just constant noise and a dad juggling legal briefs and juice boxes. 5 a.m., Arthur drags Alysa to the Oakland Ice Center. Partly to burn off her energy, partly because the man was obsessed with Michelle Kwan. Sounds like a whim, right? But whims have a funny way of becoming destiny. Group lessons turned into private coaching overnight. Coaches saw it immediately. Her spin speed was lethal, and she had absolutely zero fear. At 10, she's a national champion. At 12, she's landing perfect triples in competition. Her rise looked inevitable, but peel back the layers. Elite American figure skating isn't a hobby. It's a financial black hole. Ice time top-tier coaches flights the sequins. Sources say, at the peak, Arthur was dropping $150,000 a year on her dream. You don't come up with that kind of cash without bleeding somewhere else. Meanwhile, a shadow war was playing out behind the scenes. The feds later revealed that foreign agents were squeezing Arthur over his past, even putting a target on his daughter's back. The court documents are all over the press. The timing wasn't an accident. When your kid is skating for the Stars and Stripes at the Olympics, the spotlight burns hot. We like to simplify these stories into good guys versus bad guys. Reality is messier. We're talking legal briefs, intimidation tactics, and secret security meetings, all while a teenager is just trying to skate. If you're paying attention, you know this goes way deeper than a gold medal. It's about a chain of impossible choices that built a stage the TV cameras never see. If you're into this kind of storytelling slow burn deep dive, no hype, hit that subscribe button. We're playing the long game here, not chasing viral shorts. Now cut back to Milan, February 2026. Arthur is in the stands with his 4 other kids. A lifetime away from a mountain village. A lifetime away from that cramped apartment. That distance. That's where the real story lives. And that apartment, man, it was tiny. One-room killer rent 5 kids, a grandma and a father, grinding out a legal career one client at a time. 3 bunks jammed into a single room creates a vivid picture. It screams survival of the fittest, not future Olympic gold. Picture laundry stacked to the ceiling, schoolwork sprawling across the dinner table, and a never-ending stream of demands. Alysa looks back with a certain warmth, calling those days fun, proof that nostalgia has a way of smoothing over the rough edges. Kids don't care about square footage. They measure life in distance scale and who is actually there showing up. And Arthur. He was a constant. He was the one shuttling a 5-year-old to the Oakland Ice Center, pre-dawn alarms, brutal pickups, and sacrificed weekends. The coaches clocked it immediately, raw speed and a supernatural sense of balance. Moves that seemed to defy the laws of physics. That is when Laura Lightsky entered the picture. Group lessons vanished, replaced by one-on-one intensity. But let's kill the fairy tale right now. Elite skating isn't just about God-given talent. It is about relentless grinding work. It demands cash. It demands order. Just stepping onto that ice burns through thousands of dollars a month, and that is before you even pay the choreographer. Throw in dryland training and custom boots that get shredded by the sheer violence of triple jumps. By the time Alysa hit the professional circuit, Arthur was reportedly bleeding cash to keep the machine running. We are talking upwards of $150,000 a year. All this during financial storms that would have capsized most ordinary families. While her peers were dabbling in weekly piano lessons or rec league soccer, Alysa practically lived on the ice before she even hit puberty. Dawn patrols, afternoon run-throughs and homework squeezed in at her dad's office between client calls. She had a cup of coffee at the Oakland School for the Arts, but as the schedule swelled, traditional schooling surrendered to homeschooling. She snagged her high school diploma at 15, a feat often glossed over as just accelerated learning. In reality, it meant 0 free afternoons and erased weekends. Life narrowed down to steel blades and rigid timestamps. 12 years old, nailing a perfect triple twist on a trampoline. That is not just a stat. For a girl that age, that is stratospheric. At 13, she snatched the US senior national crown, standing on the podium as a kid, towering over veterans twice her age. The record books updated quietly in the back rooms, but inside the Federation, the pressure cooker instantly whistled. American ladies figure skating was desperate for a savior, and the media anointed her the chosen one. The microphones popped up, the lenses focused. It started as a low hum, not a heavy burden at first. Then came the atmospheric shift. Questions got pointed. One slip-up became instant viral fodder. Adults started throwing around heavy words like legacy at a middle schooler. Through it all, Arthur remained the architect of her training. He handled the logistics, the flights, the ledger. His philosophy was brutal but simple. If it matters, you go all in. No half measures. If you are in, do it right. But there is a shadow hanging over this story. Arthur wasn't just some finance dad. He was a notorious activist, and the ghosts of 1989 never really left the building. In fact, as Alysa climbed the global rankings, that past clawed its way back. Court documents later exposed specific attempts linked to Chinese authorities to squeeze or intimidate him. We are talking legal filings, not locker room gossip. The message was crystal clear. They can get to you. It didn't implode her career publicly, but it injected a sinister toxin behind the scenes. Imagine being 15, grinding on the world stage, knowing powerful adults are playing geopolitical chess with your last name. That adds a jagged edge you don't usually find in your standard wonderkin puff piece. Yet to the audience, it looked like a smooth ascent, championships, Grand Prix hardware, and buzz about quads and triples. She shattered a decades-long drought for American women. Her brand was ice-cold precision, under fire, while the world scrolled through her viral clips. They missed the endless loops, the exhaustion, the teenage doubt crushed into a suffocating timeline. Alysa later admitted her childhood was highly unusual. No bitterness, just cold facts. Starting at 5, the line between choice and destiny gets blurry. That realization hits harder than 100 news reports. The apartment didn't show chaos. It screamed autofocus and sanctuary. But the intensity, you could feel it in the air. Arthur worshipped discipline and backed his little girl with everything he had. A delicate question starts to surface. When you win that young, whose victory is it really? Is it for the child, the parent, or the machine starving for a hero? Back then, everyone bought the simple story, the prodigy, our savior on ice. But narratives have a way of untangling their own messy knots. If you remember the talent drought before 2020, you understand why the powers that be pushed so hard when they saw a spark. Figure skating isn't just dancing. It is cash flow TV contracts and national pride all hitting redline while Alysa was still waiting for her learner's permit. By Chapter 3, the tension snaps. Walking away from Beijing at 16 didn't feel like the victory lap everyone imagined. If this story sounds more tangled than a triple axel, well, that's by design. Stick with me here. By the start of 2022, Alysa Liu had graduated from promising prospect to full-blown phenomenon. 16 years old, stamped as an Olympian, and jet-setting straight for Beijing. The poetic irony of that specific destination wasn't lost on a single living soul. Her father had fled that exact country back in 1989. Decades later, his daughter was touching down on that same soil, zipped up in a jacket screaming Team USA across the back. That backstory alone carried enough weight to crush a competitor. Yet on the surface, the world kept its obsession strictly on component scores, edge calls, and slow-motion replays of her rotation. But right then, the narrative took a sharp, dark turn. Federal prosecutors in the States cracked open a case involving operatives trying to shadow, or worse, threaten Arthur Liu for his political defiance. Court filings revealed a coordinated hit job by foreign authorities to wipe him from the public eye. Awkward timing doesn't even begin to cover it. Usually, this is the part where the Hollywood script either blows everything out of proportion or conveniently cuts to black. The reality was much more grounded. Safety briefings were held. Head on a swivel. Everyone was on high alert. Through the noise, Alysa just laced up her skates and grounded out. That February in Beijing, she delivered a performance that held up while the whole planet dissected her every move. Maybe not flawless, but she handled the pressure cooker like a pro. She capped that run with a bronze medal at the World Championships that spring in Montpellier. By any metric, the season was a massive triumph. Then she slammed off the brakes, retired at 16. No farewell tour, just a social media update that felt strangely peaceful. She explained she'd been at this since she was 5 years old, 11 years of non-stop grind, and she was simply burned out. She wanted to see what the world looked like outside of a frozen oval. The reaction was instant and polarized shock, heartbreak, cheering, and total confusion. Top-tier contenders don't usually walk away at the peak of their powers, especially not when they possess that kind of technical artillery. The consensus was burnout. It was the only logical conclusion. A lifetime of training, sensational headlines, geopolitical chaos, jet lag, and crushed expectations. Sure, but labels like burnout tend to sanitize the messy reality. What she shared once the dust settled was far more compelling. She wasn't describing a mental breakdown. She spoke about breathing room, the chance to actually exist without a ticking clock counting down to the next competition. So she went out and did exactly that. She traveled, she went skiing, ironic for someone raised on ice, and started studying psychology at UCLA. She even hiked up to Everest Base Camp. That is 17,000 feet up. No camera crews, no sponsors, just purely to see if she could survive it. But there's a nuance to this hiatus that people missed. When you strip away the rigid structure that's governed your life since kindergarten, the vertigo hits you hard. The silence gets deafening. Yet she wasn't posting tearful diaries online. She had zero intention of coming back. She all but vanished from the sports world. Sometimes there's nothing more shocking than simply dropping the mic and walking off stage. During her 2-year absence, the American women's program struggled to find its footing. That gold medal drought, stretching back to 2002, wasn't breaking. A revolving door of young talent kept spinning through the ranks. Pundits debated the ROI, but the general vibe was clear. The child prodigy burned bright, fizzled out, and disappeared. That narrative makes sense on paper, but it misses the soul of it. When she finally stepped back onto the ice in 2024, the air had shifted. Now it was personal. She picked her own tracks, dictated the choreography, and built routines that actually mirrored who she was. Reports surfaced that she asked her father to step back from the daily management to let go of the reins so she could breathe. Arthur admitted it stung a bit, and honestly, who wouldn't feel that? When you've poured your wallet and your heart into something for a decade, surrendering control is agony. But he respected her wishes, and that choice might just be the linchpin of this entire saga. Outsiders call it maturity or a healthier boundary. That explains the logistics, but not the essence. The real revolution was happening internally. She wasn't competing to validate some future star label anymore. She was there to rediscover the joy of the glide. She didn't grab gold immediately. Nobody expected her to sweep the board. Before the 2025 World Championships in Boston, she literally told reporters she'd be thrilled just to crack the top 10. That wasn't false modesty. Then she went out and won the whole damn thing. She became the first American woman to snatch that crown in nearly 20 years. That victory flipped the script. What started as a whisper turned into a roar. As the 2026 season looms, the headlines have evolved. She's not the prodigy anymore. This is a story of redemption, a comeback tour. Those words sound neat, but real life is messy. By the time she hits Milan, she'll be 20, no longer a child. Not quite a grizzled veteran, but carrying a history of political warfare, instant fame, premature retirement, and a resurrection entirely of her own making. As the short program scores hit the board, you could feel the shift. The momentum wasn't just building, it was cresting like a tidal wave. Everything hinged on the final free skate. Up in the stands sat Arthur and the siblings, the same kids who used to pile into a single bedroom to sleep. Their family's odyssey, stretching from Sichuan to Beijing and finally landing in Milan, had taken turns that defied every oddmaker in Vegas. February 19th, 2026. The women's free skate in Milan wasn't just a date. It was the final destination for Alysa Liu. This wasn't some abstract dream. It was a concrete piece of history. American women hadn't touched Olympic gold in singles since 2002. 24 years. An entire generation of skaters spent their careers suffocating in the shadow of that void. But that drought, it didn't mean a damn thing to her. The pressure, however, was crushing. That night, the arena was vibrating with a raw electric pulse. It wasn't chaos. It was surgery. Every landing was life or death. Every edge was under a microscope. You could see the tension etching lines into the coaches' faces, knuckles white as they gripped the boards when the music swelled. Her performance wasn't a frantic scramble. It was a masterclass in composure, calculated, perfect. Every jump pass stuck like glue. The spins were tight and bulletproof. Halfway through, every skater hits that breaking point. Either the muscles lock up in terror or they flow. She chose to flow. If you knew what to look for, it was undeniable. Her shoulders dropped. The rhythm locked in. After the final jump, moving into the step sequence, she didn't scramble to unleash some desperate burst of energy. Instead, it was restrained and subtle, the kind of artistry you almost never see in a competitor. This was the girl crowned the next big thing at 13. A few agonizing seconds ticked by before the numbers flashed. Gold. While the crowd erupted, my eyes were glued to that little reaction box on the screen. There was her father, huddled in a pile with her siblings. The exact same family unit that once squeezed into a studio apartment, now watching their own blood stand on the Olympic podium. That shot didn't need a caption. It said everything. By the next morning, the media had already packaged it into a neat little box. The burnout prodigy who walked away only to return for redemption. It's a headline writer's wet dream. But that angle only scratches the surface. It misses the sheer weight of the journey. A rural village in Sichuan in the 1960s, Beijing in 1989. Brutal immigration hearings in California, a cramped Bay Area apartment before dawn, thousands of hours on the ice legal battles under the global microscope, a 16-year-old quitting and a 20-year-old choosing to come back. This isn't a fairy tale. These are hard facts. A stack of calculated microscopic choices layered one over the other. But look closer. In the post-game presses, she didn't talk about revenge or fulfilling some ancient prophecy. She talked about staying present, about finding joy in the skate, about gratitude for the shot. The shift in tone was jarring. In the early years, the conversation was all technical specs. Triple axel squads, youngest ever, first to land this, all the hype. In Milan, the vocabulary shifted to confidence, serenity, and agency. That doesn't erase the price she paid to get there. It just reframes it. For his part, Arthur never saw himself as the puppet master engineering a champion. Ask him and he'd say his job was to do whatever was required, funding the dream, acting as a shield, and stepping back when the time was right. There is a massive canyon between forcing a path and simply walking beside someone while they find their own way. Pundits love to debate whether high pressure forges diamonds or cracks spirits. The truth is, it does both. The world craves clean, simple answers, but life rarely gives them up. In this case, the original framework didn't break her. It just needed a remodel. She engineered a hiatus at 16, something the figure skating machine usually treats as a death sentence. That decision might be the least cinematic plot point in the movie. But without it, Milan looks very different. The second that gold medal hit her neck, the image went global. But the medal is just the finish line. It doesn't show the messy, tangled web that got her there. It's easy to look at this and say, sacrifice equals success, or walking away guarantees freedom, or that a comeback is always written in the stars. That's not a universal law. What this story really shows is how one family navigated the treacherous waters of immigration fame and crushing pressure to converge on a single night in Italy where the stars finally aligned. There's one image that sticks with me even more than the gold. After the ceremony, when the cameras panned away from the ice, someone caught a glimpse of her laughing with her siblings. It wasn't history, it was just life. It felt incredibly familiar, a callback to those years in that tiny apartment full of noise and genuine closeness. The stage had changed, the bond hadn't. If you've been following this saga, you know that gold medal was forged long before she stepped onto the ice. It was built in the quiet, gradual choices that never make the front page. Stories like this. You can't fit them into a soundbite. She was not a fairy tale prodigy, a tragic victim, or some one-in-a-million miracle. She was simply a deeply complex human being. If you appreciate gritty storytelling that digs deep and refuses to cut corners, then you have come to the right place. If this episode shifts your perspective, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so we can keep uncovering these legendary stories together. I want to hear your take. Do you believe walking away at 16 was the secret weapon behind that gold medal? Or was she destined for the top no matter what? Drop your city name in the comments. I read every single one of them. Some adventures begin with a single step. Our story begins with a piece of metal.